Wow, Tara, you wasted 5 whole years taking care of Dad. Typical of you, isn't it? But the $3 million is all mine. Not a single cent is going to my foolish little sister. Ian's voice carried a sneer, the kind that cut deeper than any insult. At that moment, I felt my strength leave me, as if my body could no longer support the weight of the words. It was as if everything I had done for the past 5 years, every late night and every sacrifice, had been dismissed as worthless. The countless hours I had poured into taking care of Dad felt like a sandcastle swept away by a sudden cruel wave. Standing before our father, who lay asleep in his hospital bed, Ian stood tall, smug, and victorious, as if he were declaring his conquest over me. In the presence of our father's peaceful breathing, Ian's cruelty made him seem like a stranger, a man I could no longer recognize as my brother. The sharp click of Ian's leather shoes echoed ominously down the hallway, each step a reminder of his confidence and greed. Once upon a time, Ian had been kind, but after taking over Dad's company, he changed completely. Greed wrapped its claws around him, and soon the brother I loved was gone. I was too afraid to meet his eyes, afraid of the man he had become, someone consumed by the lust for money. 5 years ago, when Dad suffered a stroke, I had just started my job working as a temp. Still, I juggled my job and visiting hours, doing everything I could to take care for him. In the mornings, I would wash him. In the evenings, I checked his IVs, and on weekends, I read him his favorite books. I was exhausted, body, mind, and soul. But every time I saw Dad's gentle smile, it reminded me why I kept going. After Ian got married to Stephanie, he basically stopped visiting. It was as if Dad's condition didn't matter to him anymore. And yet, there he was now, talking about Dad's inheritance like it was some prize he'd won in a game. Even as Dad's life faded, Ian stood beside him, smirking as if none of it mattered. Oh, by the way, Tara, have to hand over Dad's bank documents too. That's not negotiable. Ian pulled an envelope from his pocket, his eyes fixed on me with icy contempt. Inside was what appeared to be Dad's will. My heart froze. It had only been 2 weeks since Dad's condition took a sudden turn for the worse, and during that time Ian had visited Dad's hospital room far more often than usual. Looking back, it was clear he'd been planning something all along. He didn't seem to care about me or the effort I'd put into taking care of Dad. As the sound of a nurse's footsteps echoed through the hallway, Ian walked out of the room with a triumphant smirk plastered on his face. I turned my eyes to Dad, lying peacefully in his bed. Perhaps, I thought, there wouldn't be much time left to see this serene expression. And then something unexpected happened. My name is Tara Donovan. I'm 30 years old, working as a temp, and just barely getting by. My mom passed away when I was in 8th grade. She had been in the hospital for a long time, battling illness, but the day she passed felt abrupt, almost unreal. I remember Dad not shedding a single tear. Ian, my brother, looked bored throughout the funeral as if it were just another chore. That's when I decided I had to be the one to hold us together. More than 10 years have passed since then, and now I'm working as a temp, still trying to keep everything from falling apart. I had hoped to become a full-time employee and build a stable life, but everything changed the day Dad collapsed. He had a stroke, lost consciousness, and began a long journey of hospitalization and recovery. I kept working, but I visited the hospital every single day, staying by his side until visiting hours were over. At night, I'd get home late, do the bare minimum of housework, and collapse into bed. That routine became my life. Every time I looked at Dad lying in that hospital bed, I thought to myself, when he wakes up, I have to be there. I have to. But Ian, he never showed any interest in what I was doing. Not once. That must be tough, he'd say. And that was it. He'd go about his day like nothing happened, returning home to Stephanie and their perfect little life. That was Ian, though. He never changed. He always chased whatever caught his eyes and never thinking beyond the moment. One day on my way back from the hospital, Ian called me. Tara, don't you think it's time we made some decisions about Dad? I sighed internally. Of course, the first phone call from him in months, and this is what he wants to discuss. What decisions? What are you talking about? I mean, keeping him in the hospital like this is expensive. Don't you think we should consider moving him to a care facility? I froze, clutching my phone tightly. The thought of putting Dad in a facility had crossed my mind before, but it wasn't a decision I could make lightly. His condition isn't stable yet, Ian. Let's wait a little longer before deciding anything. Look, Tara, we can't keep this up forever. Especially you. You're working too. It must be tough. He wasn't wrong, but I could see through his words. He just wanted to wash his hands of the whole situation as soon as possible. Ian had always been someone who avoided trouble, no matter the cost. When Mom passed away, when Dad collapsed, it was always me left to pick up the pieces. I'll think about it. That was all I could say before hanging up. The cold night wind stung my cheeks. Ian and I were siblings, but sometimes it felt like we were worlds apart. On the walk back from the hospital, the streetlights cast long and lonely shadows across the road. I stopped and glanced up at the sky. Through a break in the clouds, the stars were quietly twinkling. When Mom died, I'd often stare up at the night sky like this. Back then, I thought I could find answers in the stars. I was desperate for something, anything, to guide me. Mom, am I doing the right thing? I murmured softly, my shoulders slumping under the weight of everything. But asking myself wouldn't bring any answers. It never did. When I got home, the air in my apartment felt cold and empty, as if reflecting how I felt inside. Even with the lights on, the place felt hollow, lonely. I sat on the couch and scrolled through my phone, seeing post after post of my friends enjoying their lives, laughing, traveling, celebrating. I should have felt connected, but instead I felt completely alone. Just then, my phone buzzed in my hand. The name on the screen read Eddie Schwartz, Dad's lawyer. Hello, Mr. Schwartz. Tara, sorry to call you so suddenly, but there's something important we need to discuss. Eddie's voice was calm as always, but I could sense the weight behind his words. Something serious was coming. Is this about my dad? Yes, it is. We should meet soon to go over some things. We need to prepare for when your father regains full consciousness. Eddie had been Dad's corporate lawyer for years. He was someone my father trusted implicitly. Since Dad's stroke, Eddie had been helping us navigate the complexities of his estate and his company. Okay, I'll figure out a time and get back to you. Thank you. Talk soon. As I hung up, a deep unease settled in my chest. Dad's company, Ian's scheming, and my own uncertain future. Those heavy feelings threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to think of Dad's face, peaceful and reassuring. For now, I told myself focus on the present, on caring for Dad and getting through each day. I wanted to be there when Dad woke up. That thought alone was enough to keep me going. The sound of the hospital room door opening pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up. Ian and his wife, Stephanie, walked in. Oh, you're here again, Tara. Stephanie sighed, her tone dripping with annoyance, like my presence was somehow inconvenient for her. It was infuriating. They hardly ever visited, and yet here she was, acting like I was in the way. How's Dad doing today? Ian's question was casual, distant, like he was asking about the weather. He barely glanced at Dad. Dad, as usual, was asleep, his breathing slow and steady. They had no idea I'd spent the night there watching over him. He's calmer than yesterday, but we can't let our guard down yet. I kept my answer short. Ian just let out a dismissive huh through his nose as if he barely cared. Hey, don't you think it's time we seriously discussed moving him to a care facility? I sighed inwardly. Not this again. Ian crossed his arms and added to the pressure. Honestly, keeping him in the hospital is costing a fortune. We've got our own lives to think about, you know. Their lives? It was just an excuse to justify their extravagant lifestyle. I almost said it out loud, but I swallowed the words. Confronting them here wouldn't change anything. The last thing I wanted was to create tension in front of Dad. We should wait a bit longer and see how things go. There's no need to rush into a decision right now. I tried to keep my tone calm, but Ian responded with an exaggerated click of his tongue. You always think you're so righteous, don't you? But here's the reality. This costs money, Tara. A lot of it. You think you can cover all of this on a temp's paycheck? I'll do whatever I can. Ha! Whatever you can? What does that even mean? We're not putting up any more money for this. Stephanie nodded, jumping in to back him up. We got a lot going on too, you know. There's the kids' school tuition, the mortgage. It's not like we're swimming in cash. We can't have you getting all the perks while we're struggling. Perks? The word stung like an insult. Had they ever considered how much time, energy, and sacrifice I had poured into taking care of Dad while juggling work? Can you not talk about this in front of Dad? I pleaded, but Ian just laughed through his nose, dismissive as ever. This shouldn't concern you, Tara. I'm the eldest son. I make the decisions about Dad. Then why don't you actually help out for once? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Ian shrugged like it wasn't worth his time, and Stephanie glared at me, visibly irritated. You know, this is exactly what's so annoying about you. You act all high and mighty, but at the end of the day, you're just doing this for yourself. You're just patting yourself on the back, enjoying the idea of being the good little caregiver. I felt a wave of anger rising inside me, but when I looked at Dad's peaceful face, I couldn't bring myself to lash out. Enough. Just leave. I said it in a low, steady voice. Ian grumbled under his breath. What's with the attitude? Stephanie tugged at Ian's arm, urging him to drop it. Let's just go, Ian. Talking to her is a waste of time. After they left, I let out a long, shaky breath. If Dad had been awake to witness that, what would he have thought? A few days later, one of the nurses approached me. "Tara, can I have a word with you?" Out in the hallway, she looked hesitant, like she wasn't sure how to bring up whatever she had to say. "A few days ago, I noticed your brother and his wife rummaging through one of the drawers in your father's room." "What?" "I don't mean to overstep, but it looked like they were searching for something. Are your father's personal belongings all accounted for?" The blood drained from my face as nurse's words sank in. I rushed to check Dad's belongings. His bank statements were still there, but his key case, containing the key to his safe deposit box, and his checkbook were slightly out of place. A terrible thought struck me. Could Ian and Stephanie have been planning something underhanded? What had they been trying to do while Dad was in such a fragile state? It didn't take long for me to get my answer. One day I entered the hospital room and saw Ian holding Dad's hand, trying to make him grip something. "What are you doing?" I rushed over, and Ian snapped at me, annoyed by my intrusion. "Stay out of this!" In Dad's weak hand was a pen, trembling as Ian forced it into his grip. "Stop it! You can't make him sign anything in his condition!" Dad's eyes fluttered open, and in a faint, raspy voice he said my name. "Tara." I froze, tears welling up in my eyes. For the first time, I wondered if he had been more aware of what was happening than I realized. I gently took Dad's hand, brushing Ian's away with more force than I realized. "Leave. Now." Ian clicked his tongue in frustration and stood up. "You're such a pain, Tara. If you actually cared about Dad, you wouldn't pull stunts like this." Ian didn't respond. He just grabbed his coat, motioned for Stephanie, and stormed out of the room. Dad let out a soft sigh, his hand still trembling in mine. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize, Dad. I'm here for you." Just then, the door to the hospital room opened again. It was Eddie Schwartz. "Hey, Tara, is everything all right?" Eddie was Dad's trusted attorney and someone who had been close to our family for years. Eddie nodded quietly and placed a reassuring hand on Dad's shoulder. "Your father told me everything. Don't worry, we have all the evidence we need." I turned to Dad, shocked. He gave me a faint smile. "It's okay, Tara. I know everything." 5 years had passed since Dad's stroke. After a long battle, he was finally showing signs of recovery. With every rehab session, his speech grew clearer, and seeing that progress filled me with hope. I had been waiting for this day for so long. Maybe all those days of sitting by his bedside, holding his hand, and talking to him had paid off. "Dad, you're amazing. Truly." The words tumbled out, carried by the emotion swelling in my chest. "You haven't seen anything yet." His voice was raspy, but there was strength behind it, an unshakable determination. I fought back tears as I gently squeezed his hand. Feeling its warmth and strength filled me with a joy I hadn't known in years. "You're only going to get better from here. Let's keep working on rehab together." "Of course. First thing I'll do when I'm out of here is eat something delicious." "That sounds great. Steak maybe? Or sushi?" "Steak. It's been way too long." Being able to have such an ordinary, carefree conversation felt like a treasure, a moment I had almost forgotten how to cherish. I decided to call Ian immediately. Despite everything, I thought he'd want to know that Dad was finally making progress. I foolishly believed that he'd be happy to hear the news. But Ian's response on the phone was nothing like what I had hoped for. "Oh, that's good, I guess." That was it. Just a flat, disinterested remark. His reaction was colder than I expected. In fact, he almost sounded anxious, like this wasn't good news for him. Something about it didn't sit right with me, but I let it go and ended the call. Then, as if on cue, Ian and Stephanie, who had rarely bothered to visit Dad, started showing up at the hospital almost daily. Their visits were rushed, their behavior erratic, as if they were searching for something or working against a deadline. "So I hear your dad is doing better?" Stephanie's smile was plastered on, fake and brittle. Draped in a pristine white cardigan and clutching an expensive designer bag, she looked completely out of place in the hospital room. "He's still in rehab, but yes, he's making progress." I kept my tone calm, refusing to let her presence rattle me. But it was clear to me that there was something else behind their sudden interest. They didn't seem genuinely happy about Dad's recovery. In fact, I felt more like they were worried. Well, aren't we all a bit surprised by his sudden recovery? 5 years bedridden and now this? It's like a miracle. I smiled politely, but my eyes stayed on them, watching their every move. Stephanie walked around Dad's bed, her gaze darting to the drawers and shelves as though she was searching for something. "By the way, Tara, where are Dad's bank documents and checkbook? You know, just in case we need them." Ian's abrupt question made my head spin. "What are you talking about?" "I don't mean anything weird by it. You know, just in case. It's smart to double-check these things." Ian gave a forced chuckle, but his eyes stayed cold and calculating. Exactly. If we don't sort these things out now, it could get messy later. Isn't it obvious that Dad's getting better? Why would you even bring this up now? My voice wavered slightly, but I tried to hold my ground. Suddenly, all of Ian and Stephanie's recent behavior clicked into place in my mind. Why had they suddenly started visiting Dad so often after years of neglect? Why were they constantly observing him, almost as if they were gauging his recovery? And why were they so fixated on the bank documents and checkbook? There was, in fact, a drawer in Dad's hospital room where his valuables were kept. Could they be planning to raid it? Please stop talking about this in front of Dad. I said it as calmly as I could, even though my heart was pounding. But Ian and Stephanie didn't seem to care. They simply exchanged smug glances. And that's not for you to decide. Ian's icy words pierced through me, but I stood my ground. Watching Ian and Stephanie now, I felt a deep, gnawing emptiness rise within me. I glanced over at Dad's face. His eyes were still closed, but I knew that he was awake, listening to every word. Dad, when you're feeling better, we should take a trip together again. I forced myself to sound cheerful, hoping to change the atmosphere in the room. Maybe a beach resort or a quiet place to relax. And we'll go out for steak. You've been craving that, right? That sounds good. Real good. His smile was faint, but there was a glimmer of joy in it. Just seeing that smile made everything feel worth it. Meanwhile, Eddie stood off to the side, watching us intently. He seemed like he had something important to say. A few days later, on my way home from the hospital, Eddie called me out of the blue. Tara, can I have a moment? There's something important we need to discuss. Eddie's voice, usually calm and composed, had a subtle edge of tension. Of course. Is something wrong? Not wrong exactly, but it's best if we meet in person to discuss it. Without hesitation, I headed to his office, my stomach churning with unease. When I walked into Eddie's office, I saw several thick files spread out across his desk. I recognized them immediately. They were documents related to Dad's company and his estate. Your father finalized some critical arrangements recently, especially since he seems to be making such good progress. His words made me sit up straighter, hanging on every syllable. What kind of arrangements? Well, he transferred all of his assets to you as part of a living trust. I felt my breath catch in my throat. He did it to prevent any disputes over the inheritance. Dad had trusted me, and he was completely aware of Ian's scheme. But Ian and Stephanie don't know. They're still focused on the will, assuming it'll work in their favor. The weight of his words settled over me, and something shifted within me. So you're saying Ian and Stephanie are after the inheritance? That's highly likely, especially given their recent behavior. Everything Ian and Stephanie had been doing and saying finally clicked into place. In that moment, I made a silent vow. I would protect Dad and his legacy at all costs. The next day, when I arrived at the hospital, Dad was awake, gazing out the window. How's it looking outside? A little chilly, but it's sunny. It feels nice. He smiled faintly and turned to look at me. Eddie told me, "It's all taken care of now, isn't it?" His words took me by surprise. Dad, are you sure this is what you wanted? Of course. I wanted my assets in the hands of someone I trust. And that's you, Tara. There was a quiet but unshakable resolve in his eyes. But there might still be challenges ahead. His words carried a weight, almost like a warning. And soon enough, his warning would become reality. One day I was called to my father's hospital room. When I walked in, I saw Eddie Schwartz, my father's lawyer, along with my brother Ian and his wife, Stephanie. My father lay silently in the hospital bed, his eyes closed, his breathing faint. Daniel's condition has taken a turn for the worse. He's been given a prognosis of 1 month left to live. Eddie's words sent a chill through my entire body, as though my blood had turned to ice. This can't be true. If you find it hard to believe, I can show you the doctor's diagnosis. Eddie replied calmly, his tone almost too composed for the moment. I turned to look at my father's face. Just a few days ago he had been smiling, speaking as though everything was fine. That memory now felt like a cruel lie. Now, about the matter of the will. The moment Eddie pulled out the documents, Ian snatched them aggressively from his hands. The eldest son inherits everything. Ian's declaration lit up both his and Stephanie's faces with smug satisfaction. We did it, Ian! $3 million, just like that! And not a single penny for you, Tara. 5 years of caregiving, thanks for your hard work. Too bad it was all for nothing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could they say something so vile in front of my father? Anger and frustration surged through me, making my whole body tremble. Ignoring my trembling, Ian and Stephanie walked out of the room laughing as if they had just scored a victory. They left quickly, as though the hospital room and everything in it, including my father, were no longer of any use to them. For a moment, the room was silent except for the rapid pounding of my heartbeat. which seemed deafening in the quiet. And then out of nowhere, my father's eyes slowly opened, and he grinned. His gaze met mine as if he was trying to convey something without words. I froze in shock, unable to move or speak. What about the prognosis? How could he open his eyes at this moment? It's all been taken care of. Don't worry. His words were spoken so calmly I could hardly believe my ears. I stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. What? At that moment, Eddie spoke with measured calm. The prognosis was a lie. Those words struck me like a bolt of lightning. I couldn't wrap my head around what they truly meant. It was all part of a plan to test them. Eddie continued, his voice steady and firm. I was so stunned that I couldn't find the words to respond. The truth my father had kept from me was unraveling right before my eyes, overturning everything I thought I knew. We're fully aware of all your brother and Stephanie's actions. From trying to steal the key to the safe deposit box to rummaging through the bank account records, we have it all documented. Eddie spoke calmly, as if this were simply another day at work for him. It took me a moment to fully digest what he was saying. One by one, the memories of my brother and Stephanie's actions came flooding back, and it all finally made sense. If I hadn't taken action, they would have made your life miserable after I'm gone. His words pierced my heart. I didn't want to admit it, but I knew it was the truth. I suddenly found myself thinking back to my childhood memories with Ian. Back then, he was the protective older brother I could always rely on. But now, that same brother had become the person I needed to fear and guard myself against the most. Blinded by greed, he had turned into someone who threatened my very existence. That's why I went as far as staging my own impending death, to expose their true colors. My father's words sounded like a masterfully orchestrated strategy. Hearing this, I wrestled internally with a whirlwind of emotions. But I knew there must have been a good reason for him to go to such lengths. So, will you help me see this to the end? His question weighed heavily on me. I stayed silent for a while, lost in thought. Countless possibilities swirled in my mind, appearing and vanishing just as quickly. Ian and Stephanie, my father's intentions, and my own future. All of it felt tangled and overwhelming. Everything seemed to blur together, pushing me toward a decision I wasn't sure I was ready to make. All right. That one word escaped my lips before I had even fully processed it. It was the moment I resolved myself to face this head on. And so, the plan was set into motion. A month later, my father made a miraculous recovery and was discharged from the hospital. And, as planned, we staged a funeral and led Ian and Stephanie to believe that my father had passed away. On that day, I didn't shed a single tear, calmly orchestrating everything in accordance with my father's wishes. I did it to honor his will and to protect my own future. Ian and Stephanie showed up at the funeral, completely unsuspecting. But they seemed more interested in the logistics of the inheritance and quickly began pushing for the formalities to move forward. Hey Tara, shouldn't you get things rolling with the paperwork? We got plans to make, so let's not drag this out. Exactly. We need to sort things out with the bank. Shouldn't you bring in the lawyer? The sooner we start, the less hassle it'll be. Neither of them showed any sign of mourning for my father. Their minds were fixated entirely on the money. They acted as if they'd already won, their arrogance palpable. It made sense. They'd already blown through their savings and were rumored to be drowning in debt. There's no need to rush. Before I could finish, Stephanie crossed her arms and snapped at me. What? You're not trying to delay things on purpose, are you? No, that's not it. Then get on with it already. You're still not hung up on your dad's will, leaving everything to Ian, are you? Ian smirked at her remark, looking pleased with himself. I mean, sure, you spent 5 years taking care of Dad. I get why you'd be bitter. But hey, Dad made his choice. Nothing you can do about it. As I listened to Ian's words, I clenched my teeth so tightly it hurt. After the funeral, Eddie began the formal reading of the will and explaining the inheritance process. Regarding the inheritance, all major assets have already been gifted during Daniel's lifetime. What remains to be divided are his collection of vintage records and old postage stamps. Eddie's calm, steady voice echoed in the now silent room. What? Stephanie's jaw dropped, and Ian furrowed his brow. Hold on a second. What's that supposed to mean? Wasn't I supposed to inherit everything? Eddie didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly laid out the documents in front of him. Sure, that's what the will states. However, prior to that, your father finalized a complete transfer of his assets to Tara as a living gift. Thus, the only items eligible for inheritance are his collection of records and stamps. What? That's ridiculous. Ian shot to his feet, slamming his fist against the table. This is absurd. This can't be legal. Get another lawyer in here. Stephanie joined in, yelling as she lunged for the documents in Eddie's hands. I refuse to accept this. There's been some kind of mistake. He said Ian would get everything. Eddie narrowed his eyes slightly and calmly gathered the documents. Every step was done in accordance with the law. Even if you were to file a lawsuit, your claims wouldn't hold up. Ian tried to argue further, but Eddie's firm words left no room for negotiation. Then what the hell are we supposed to do? I suggest you leave. Eddie delivered his statement without a hint of emotion. Ian and Stephanie, now visibly panicked, turned toward me. Tara, come on, say something. This is completely unfair. I'm getting nothing? This can't be happening. Yeah, I bet you were planning this from the start, weren't you? Trying to trick us all along? I slowly stood and locked eyes with the two of them. If you keep this up, I'll have no choice but to call the police. Those simple words were enough to freeze them in their tracks. Ian seemed ready to argue, but Stephanie grabbed his arm and tugged. Let's go, Ian. Seething with frustration, they stormed out of the room. There was nothing else they could do, and rightly so. They'd done so many despicable things, all of which my father had witnessed. Even now, my father didn't seem keen on exposing them completely. If they're truly willing to change, I'd be willing to forgive them. My father has said after his hospital discharge, though his eyes reflected a faint sadness, Ian and Stephanie would go on to betray even this final shred of hope he had for them. Following that day, Ian and Stephanie not only shattered my father's hopes, but plunged themselves deeper into ruin. The calls and messages from Ian and Stephanie began arriving daily, their content becoming increasingly absurd. Tara, please, help us. We were wrong. We've suffered enough. Please just forgive us. Every time I read their pleading messages, my chest tightened with conflicting emotions. Yet their words always rang hollow, as though their apologies were nothing more than desperate acts. Ian's words, in particular, always carried the subtle undertone of blaming someone else for his failures. Still, instead of backing off, they started showing up at my house unannounced. Tara, I'm so sorry. Remember how we used to be such a happy family? Please, can we talk? We just want to start over. Standing in the doorway, looking at the two of them, I took a deep breath. Their eyes flickered with desperation and fear, but more than anything, I could see their self-serving intentions. Please, just leave. I have no intention of getting involved with you anymore. With that, I quietly closed the door. In that moment, I realized they would never truly change. Even so, their attempts to reach me didn't stop. Day by day, I became more and more drained, and I began seriously considering moving. The thought of starting over somewhere new crossed my mind more frequently. But just as I was beginning to plan my escape, an even bigger issue awaited me. When I arrived at work one day, I immediately noticed a strange shift in my coworkers' behavior. They avoided me, whispering to one another just out of earshot. Later that day, my boss called me into their office and demanded an explanation. Tara, care to explain this? He pointed to an anonymous complaint email sitting on his desk. It detailed accusations that I had abandoned my father's care purely out of greed for his inheritance. To make matters worse, the email included doctored photos as proof. The photos depicted scenes as if I had neglected my father's care. This isn't me. I denied it desperately, but my boss's expression remained stony. The company can't afford to take any risks with this kind of reputation on the line. I'm sorry, but we can't keep you on any longer. At those words, I felt all the strength drained from my body. I knew without a doubt that this was Ian and Stephanie's doing, but I felt powerless to stop it. I had been completely ensnared in the web of malice they had spun. The hardest part of it all was that the rumors eventually reached my father. He suddenly became distant, and I felt as though I was being crushed under the weight of despair. Doesn't anyone trust me anymore? That question echoed in my mind over and over. A few days later, I received an unexpected call from Eddie Schwartz. Tara, please come to your father's house as soon as you can. It's time to finally settle this. Eddie's voice was calm as usual, but his words carried a weight that hinted at something important. Taking his words to heart, I decided to head to my father's house. Drawn by Eddie's phrase that, we need to settle this, I found myself walking up to my father's home. Inside the house, my father's employees, neighbors, and even relatives were gathered. As I arrived, the house was enveloped in an atmosphere completely different from usual. Normally quiet, today the house was bustling with people. I recognized familiar faces, my father's employees, neighbors, and distant relatives. Everyone stood in silence as if waiting for something to happen. Stepping inside, a strange, tight feeling gripped my chest. Eddie greeted me with a polite smile, but there was a hint of tension in his expression. Tara, thank you for coming. There's a lot we need to talk about today. Eddie spoke in his usual composed tone, but I sensed something hidden behind his words. As I stepped further into the room, all eyes turned to me, and the unease made my face stiffen. The gaze of everyone present felt cold, as if they were judging my every move. Among the crowd were my brother Ian and his wife Stephanie. Ian looked at me with a smile, but his eyes carried a subtle contempt. So, you were after the inheritance too, huh? Honestly, I didn't see that coming. Ian sneered as he threw the words at me. I felt a wave of anger rise in me, making my chest burn. Taking a deep breath, I struggled to stay calm. Why don't you just come clean, Tara? Stephanie smirked as she chimed in. You were probably just neglecting the caregiving while plotting to snatch the inheritance, weren't you? Her words stung, but I bit back the urge to argue and chose to stay silent. The other attendees stood by watching the scene unfold. They all wore skeptical expressions, and it was clear they doubted me deep down. Has everyone stopped believing in me? I thought, my heart sinking. I stood there stunned and frozen, unable to move. Inside my chest, a crushing sense of everything falling apart overwhelmed me. Just then, Eddie quietly stood up and began operating the projector screen that had been set up. Everyone, please hold on for a moment. With those words, the tension in the room heightened instantly, becoming almost suffocating. The screen flickered to life, revealing a scene no one could have anticipated. It was footage from a surveillance camera installed in my father's hospital room. The video showed me late at night exhausted, but still dutifully taking care of my father. In the footage, I was clearly seen anxiously monitoring his condition and working with the nurses to ensure his well-being. What? What is this? Someone gasped in shock as the footage played on. The video served as undeniable proof of my devoted caregiving efforts. Then the screen displayed further footage, my brother and his wife obsessively discussing the inheritance, rummaging through drawers, and rifling through my father's bank records. You two. You didn't. Another shocked voice broke the silence. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my mind racing to comprehend what was unfolding. The footage, captured by the hidden surveillance cameras Eddie had discreetly installed, had been meticulously compiled as evidence. Next, testimony from nurses and doctors was presented, further proving the extent of my dedication to my father's care. Even my neighbors appeared on the screen, offering their statements. It turned out there were people who had believed in me all along. They had suspected my brother and his wife's schemes and had been quietly gathering evidence to support me. Yet, for reasons I now understood, they hadn't been able to approach me directly until this very moment. Around the room, people glared at Ian and Stephanie with eyes full of anger and condemnation. Ian and Stephanie panicked, shouting, "This is fake! This is a setup!" But no one paid them any mind. Finally, I realized that I was being believed, and a wave of warmth surged through my chest. At that moment, my father appeared in the room. For a moment, I wasn't sure if the scene unfolding before me was real. My brother and Stephanie looked even more stunned. After all, they had attended his funeral. This can't be real. You were supposed to be dead. Ian and Stephanie were completely shaken, their faces pale with shock. If you had shown even the slightest remorse, I would have revealed the truth at the funeral. But I cannot forgive the way you tried to destroy your own sister while I was still alive. My father's voice was calm, yet it carried a forceful undercurrent of anger. Ian and Stephanie grew visibly more distraught, their faces turning a sickly shade of pale. Ian and Stephanie stood frozen, their expressions twisted with fear and disbelief as the weight of my father's words sank in. Eddie stepped forward, his calm yet commanding voice filling the room as he began to deliver the final blow with irrefutable evidence. Take a look at this. These are emails proving that you both conspired to fraudulently obtain the inheritance. The screen now displayed an email chain between Ian and Stephanie detailing their meticulous and sinister plans. Their emails outlined strategies to usurp the inheritance and slander my reputation with fabricated evidence. This is fake! It has to be fabricated. Stephanie's trembling voice betrayed her attempt to feign outrage, making her guilt all the more evident. The room fell into a stunned silence, every eye locked on the disgraceful scene playing out on the screen. This is awful. Did they really do this? Relatives and neighbors began murmuring their outrage, their voices growing louder with each passing moment. How could they do something so cruel to their own family? Ian and Stephanie had no words left. They simply stood there paralyzed as the weight of their actions bore down on them. Your actions are unforgivable. You betrayed your family and disgraced yourselves as human beings. My father's harsh condemnation caused Ian's shoulders to visibly tremble. Dad, please, forgive us. We made a mistake. Ian fell to his knees, pleading with a broken voice that echoed in the tense room. But my father only gazed down at him with cold, steely eyes, offering no sign of sympathy. Your apologies mean nothing. The only thing you can do now is atone for your crimes. Stephanie, too, tried to clutch at my father, sobbing uncontrollably, but he calmly pushed her away. Eddie stood up once more, his voice steady and authoritative. At this point, I believe it's time to decide whether to proceed with legal action against you both. At Eddie's words, Ian and Stephanie's faces turned ashen, their earlier arrogance now replaced by sheer panic. Please, no, not court. Anything but that. There's gotta be another way. Don't ruin us like this. Their desperate pleas echoed through the room, but no one paid them any attention. In the end, Ian and Stephanie were reported to the police and escorted out in handcuffs, their downfall witnessed by all. The atmosphere in the room was heavy yet eerily calm, with everyone silently watching as the disgraced pair were taken away. I exhaled deeply, feeling the heavy burden I had carried for years finally lift from my heart. At last, everything was over. The silence was finally broken by my father's calm, steady voice. It's done. But remember, this is only the beginning. His words stirred a deep emotion within me. Relatives and neighbors began murmuring among themselves, their voices growing louder with approval. Tara, you've been through so much. Your resilience is truly admirable. I'm so relieved the truth came to light and that you were vindicated. Hearing their kind words, I felt tears well up in my eyes. For so long I had been under the shadow of doubt, but now those same eyes looked at me with trust and respect. Now finally, you can live your life the way you deserve. I nodded at his words and took a deep, steadying breath. In the days that followed, I helped my father tidy up his home, and we spent time in quiet companionship. The precious items my father had almost lost to Ian and Stephanie were safe, untouched. Among them was an old family photo album. Looking at photos of a younger Ian and me smiling together, I felt a pang of sadness deep in my chest. I found myself asking, what does it truly mean to be a family? But when my father gently placed a hand on my shoulder, I felt as though I had part of the answer. Family isn't defined by blood alone. It's built on trust and love. Those words etched themselves in my heart. Meanwhile, Ian and Stephanie's situation continued to spiral downward. With their conviction for fraud, they lost every shred of social credibility. I heard they were drowning in debt, living in constant fear of loan sharks pounding on their door. Their lives had crumbled, leaving no trace of their former arrogance. In the end, they divorced, each retreating to live in isolation and misery. When I heard about their downfall, I felt no sympathy for them. This was the harvest of the seeds they had sown, the result of their own actions. On the other hand, I was finally able to start a new chapter in my life. With Eddie's support, I found a new job and began living an independent, fulfilling life. I cherished the time with my father and reclaimed the life I had nearly lost. The days I fought to protect my family's bond and my own justice had made me stronger. Above all, I never forgot to be grateful to those who believed in me. Justice will always prevail. Feeling the truth of those words gave me the strength to move forward. From now on, I will continue to build peaceful days with my father. And I vowed to carve out a bright future with my own strength. This was just the start for me.